Now we're outside with the FinePix SH1000FD, so let's see how long it takes to power up. Flick the switch there, and about 2 seconds later you're ready for action. Now let's have a look at the optical zoom range of this camera. Here we are, fully zoomed out to an equivalent wide angle of 27mm. Now let's zoom all the way in, and here we are, let me just focus here, operating at the full 18 times optical range at an equivalent focal length of 486mm, which is pretty impressive. But as usual, you can see a fair amount of camera shake here, but fortunately the SH1000FD has image stabilisation. It actually shifts its sensor to counteract camera shake, and to activate that you press a button on the top of the camera, and then to actually see it in action you have to half press the shutter release button. So there we are, and you can see that familiar floating effect as the stabilisation takes place, and you can see that is very effectively eliminating camera shake. As soon as I let go of the shutter release you can see it wobbling quite significantly again. So here we are zoomed all the way out, and now let's zoom in as far as the camera will allow us, and you'll notice the little dot in the middle of the screen. We're going to aim for that. That little dot is now nothing other than quite a large steamship, but you'll notice at this zoom range I'm shaking a lot. But of course the other special thing about the 550UZ is its anti-shake system. Now this activates when you press the shutter release button halfway in, so let's see how effective that is. So with the shutter button pressed halfway, you can see straight away that the anti-shake system is working very effectively. If I let go of the button, you can see I'm still shaking a lot. So let's zoom all the way back out again. Now, like most cameras, now let's check out the optical zoom range of this camera. Here we are zoomed out at an equivalent of 28mm. Now we'll zoom into its 18 times mark, and that's working at an equivalent of 504mm, and it's really brought in that distant landscape. We can also see that I'm shaking quite a lot. The stabilisation is currently switched off, and to enable that you just push in the joystick to the right of the screen, and I'm going to choose mode 1, which means it's stabilising all the time. And you can see now that that is so much steadier than before. It's just floating the image. So the stabilisation on the FZ18 is very effective, and that's very useful when you've got a lens that can zoom into this amount. Now let's zoom back out again and I'll show you some of the other features of this camera. Now of course the really special thing about the FZ50 and the FZ30 before it is its massive optical zoom. So here we are zoomed all the way out, and I'm now going to zoom all the way in. As you can see, it's pretty impressive. Now of course you'll notice something going on here. I'm shaking a little bit here. But of course the FZ50 can compensate for this using its optical image stabilisation. So I'm going to switch it on here, put it on mode 1 here, and you can see immediately this is still zoomed all the way in. You can see it's looking completely steady. If I turn that off, you can see how I'm shaking quite a lot. This is incredibly handy if you're using this long zoom. Now let's have a look at the actual optical zoom range. This camera offers an equivalent range of 36 to 432mm. That's a massive 12 times optical zoom range, and to illustrate that in practice I'm going to zoom in on this little white dot in the middle of the lake. So you can see zooming all the way into 12 times here, and if I press the shutter button halfway to focus you can see that it's in fact a steamship going across the lake. You'll also notice that it's shaking quite a lot. That's because I'm zoomed in so much. But like other Panasonic cameras, the FZ8 has optical image stabilisation. I'm going to switch that on now. There's 2 modes to choose from. I'm going to choose mode 1, that basically stabilises all of the time. So here we are, and you'll now see that the image is kind of floating much more steadily than it was before. Now it's still shaking a little bit. It's not absolutely perfect, but it's a massive improvement on what we had earlier. So let's zoom back out again. Now it's time to check the optical zoom range of this camera, and it goes from 31 to an equivalent of 465mm. So to demonstrate that in practice, let's zoom in on this little white mark on the middle of the screen. Here we are zooming in, now all the way to 15 times. That's quite a significant zoom range there. That really has allowed us to pull in the detail on this boat crossing the lake. But let's see what the image stabilization is like on this camera. To do that, press the menu button and turn on the steady shot. You'll see that it's off at the moment, and you can choose to have it on all the time or just when you press the shutter release button to save a bit of battery life. That's what we're going to do right now. So we'll select that, press the menu to exit, get the boat in the middle of the screen, and then press the shutter button halfway to focus. Now you'll see that's much steadier, and you get that floating effect that you do with other image stabilization systems. It's also interesting to do it again just to see how quickly the camera focuses when it's fully zoomed in. Now that is pretty quick. This is actually one of the quickest compact, well, non-DSLR cameras for focusing. So if you're into that sort of thing, this is quite important. One of the other things worth mentioning is that the H9 actually has two different optical zoom speeds.